This is Nick, the Mining Book Guy. It's the morning of Sunday, January 24th, 2021. It's been a few months since I've made a video. Part of that reason is that, as a personal disclosure, I've moved to Omaha, Nebraska. It's probably the only reason some of you out of the States know of Omaha is it's where Warren Buffett lives, not too far away from him. But because of the move and happened right around the holidays, been a little bit in disarray. Not been able to follow the markets quite as closely as I'd like. Definitely not getting back to people. That's nothing new. No excuse for that, but makes it even harder for all of that. But I'm getting back in the mix now, and I've been talking to a lot of CEOs on a regular basis, including Nana at Roscan Gold, which you can see is what we're discussing today. Roscan ROS on the TSXV, one of my top 3 holdings, and probably the one I am most excited about in the short term, which is why we're making the video. I would definitely recommend this as a buy right now, whether you own shares or whether you are new to the story, especially people new to my YouTube channel. But if you are new, or if somehow you missed this anyway, my best video last year for sure was my Roscan focused video, which was released exclusively to the email on April 15th, 2020, and then a few days later it went public. I'll have links to everything below. By the way, disclosure as always, I may buy or sell at any time. I always say that, but you can at least be assured that when I tell you I'm buying something, I own a lot of shares. I wouldn't say that otherwise. But any errors are mine and mine alone, and I am completely independent from these companies, as I've always mentioned. And my Twitter feed, the pinned tweet includes actually my 3 biggest wins from last year. Not something I necessarily expected, but that's how it turned out. Roscan, Osino Resources in Namibia, and Chesser Resources in Senegal. So I still bet really big on a few plays. I've definitely had a bunch of losers. Some of the stocks that I've picked haven't really moved yet or even moved down a little bit because I'm very focused on the gold space, and the gold space hasn't looked that great. But it's very notable that with Roscan, I could not have had better timing, almost too good of timing, because if you guys waited a little too long, you would have probably missed the move if you waited more than a month. So just as a recap, the reason this pick worked out so well is I think the technicals and the fundamentals were aligned. Many things I said in that last video ended up being pretty much right on for the following few months. It moved faster than I expected. So from roughly 20 cents to 50 cents in 3 months. And that's 150% return, even if you didn't quite get the whole move. Pretty easy to have gone 100%, and I couldn't ask for more, in terms of making a pick that you guys could benefit from in the short term. But two major things. I think what's most notable to me of last year is that many stocks, especially laggards that didn't really have that many catalysts, by the time we got to June, they started to move, whether in the gold or silver space, from optionality. Just the rising prices help them move because they already might have an asset out there. Roscan is not one of those plays, and anyone who follows me knows I tend to be more focused on exploration. And lately, I've been more focused on these, exploration development hybrid type stories where the resource isn't too far away. Roscan does fit that. But what's important is that in a moderately good, gold price environment, plays like Roscan generally do better than the optionality. And I think you would have more understanding of a risk reward in that case. If you're looking, this is just an important point. If you're looking for plays where there's a big asset out there and you don't care about any of the work going on, I'm probably not the right person to listen to. But if you're looking for plays where a rising gold price is icing on the cake to a new discovery, or a discovery that's growing, that's my bread and butter. And so Roscan worked out quite well up until August, and many plays ended up not working too well, but Roscan had a double whammy of a coup in Mali, which I will address pretty soon. But you can see that the stock's basically been flat ever since August. And the thesis, or the kind of thesis for this YouTube, is that if we look at all the work that Roscan has done and that the stock is still flat, this is a pretty exciting second entry point or a way to get back in the stock. And I'm going to describe, I think, a timeline very, very soon in this video. And then I'm going to try to simplify why I'm especially excited about Roscan right now, why I'm focusing on Roscan rather than my other large positions or anything else to discuss in this YouTube video. So before getting into the timeline, I was not planning to make this video until Tuesday this week, where I saw this news on Kabaya, which is one of the Roscan targets, or developing deposits, and I thought this was excellent news. We are gonna go into details. The only news release will go into detail later in this video, but the stock basically over the last, basically went down on the day of that news. And I was just thinking, oh, what an opportunity. Even I'm kind of feeling like, oh, what's going to turn this around? And it's very possible that was the bottom, because it seems that both retail and institutional investors, particularly institutional investors, are picking up on this. We'll discuss more later, but I did have, I wasn't planning to make this video until that moment. And I think that whenever I see that disconnect, that's when I get excited and I feel like I need to share it with all you free email subscribers out there. So we'll hone in on that particular news. But if we look at the Roscan PowerPoint, here's one. This is from January 2021. Currently, the key slide on slide 3 is this timeline, which overall is very good for someone who wants a snapshot on the company. But I have to say it's pretty busy. I would say that most layman retail investors, they're probably not going to pick up on all of this. Maybe the institutional guys will be able to, and more retail who loves to really dive deep like myself, this is helpful. But I think part of why I'm making this video is to help simplify this timeline and figure out how the company is going to transition in communication. But in terms of value add, it's all here and it's huge value. So we're going to pick out select aspects of this timeline. And one of the most important that we're going to get back to was the acquisition of the Dabia Sud property, where Kabaya is right here, where Kabaya is located. And when this happened, this was May, the company was moving up mostly on drill results. And I think a lot of people at the time might have thought, oh, they're actually paying too much. I think I even saw a few people on Twitter say, 3.2 million Canadian for this property that doesn't seem like too much work has gone on. Well, in hindsight, this was an absolute steal. I'm going to mention that a few more times. But strategically, it was so good because Oklo's right here, and this is, could have gone either way, and it went to Roscan. So that was a great piece of news, and it just was, going to take a little bit of time to develop. There were more drill results on Mankuki South, which had been the main focus, but things kind of came to a screeching halt. Oops, I got this out of order. Move this back here. So August 18th is unfortunately where the military coup kind of peaked, and the president at the time resigned, and it was kind of scary. Now, Mali has gone through this before. I think 2012, 2013 was the last time, and there is all sorts of awful terrorism and battling going on in other parts of Mali, something I addressed in the last video. But for me personally, I was maybe a little overly scared because, in a transition, you just don't know if things will change. Now, in terms of share price, it definitely took a hit. It literally was right here. You can see the volume went up. You can see you basically went down from the high 40s to the high 30s or mid 30s, and it's kind of stayed there ever since. But really importantly, Mali agreed to an 18-month transition government in September. That is actually in it felt like ages to me that the coup was undertaking. In hindsight, I can't believe it took like a month for things to kind of resolve. That is very impressive. Now, I will just, without going into the details, because I never promise this, I was selling some shares. I won't say how much, but I was definitely selling shares on this news here. By the time September came around, I started buying some of those back. So I am fallible. I thought, maybe it would bounce at that point, but unfortunately, this coincided with the gold market kind of dying too. So there was a bit of a double whammy, but it's not like I was static. I was worried myself, but by the time September came around, already things looking better. And as things have moved forward, we really haven't heard any issues. And importantly, maybe I didn't respect enough that B2 Gold, Barrick operations were going on as usual. So I am still, very happy about the resiliency of West Africa. I mean, I didn't include this here, but I even made a tweet about how there, was growing insecurity in West Africa, and really, we are seeing every time something kind of bad happens, it gets better. Whether it's not just Mali, Burkina Faso, Ivory Coast. So I'm very happy that there is a semblance of stability, and the fact that this is an 18-month transition makes me feel that through 2021 we will have that moderate stability. That could change, but so far so good in terms of this transition. Better than I expected. How I was feeling in August. Now moving forward from there, I think that it was very undervalued that Roscan had, three news releases. I'm going to go through these quickly. October 5th, this is a new discovery at Candiole Nord. And actually, there were three separate discoveries. Arguably this developing Candiole trend was most important, but still these were nice results. And just to gives when 2 meters at 53 on one of those deposits, 4 meters at 8.7. These are significant from surface. The beginnings of an exciting discovery. But then we move forward a few weeks, October 22nd, another major discovery, and this was even better number, right? 8 meters at 21 grams with a very high grade intersection in between. This is Walia, completely different area. The Walia trend up here, and this was on the new property, the Dabia Sud property. So that's exciting. That wow, another discovery. And if that wasn't enough. Maybe these were out of order a little bit. I think actually I just kept this on the same news release. Another discovery in November, and probably the most impressive of all in terms of numbers, 32 meters at 5 grams per ton, including 16 at 9. And this was on the Musala property. And then some of these older Musala drill results were highlighted as well. And so in itself, this is actually justifying the acquisition of Dabia Sud, because you could see that it looks like there's a connection between Walia and Musala here, and there likely will also be a connection between Musala and Dabia. And by the way, ignore the little gap here. This is all connected. You don't have to worry about that. This is really implying what a great acquisition that Dabia Sud was, because we're going to have trends that are probably going to go across both properties. And so all of this is really exciting, but the share price didn't really move at all. And then, just to add one other point, this was a little later in November, and this is going back to Mankuki South, which was, the one of the earlier exciting discoveries. What's notable to me was that the best fresh rock hit, which is very clearly widening at depth and getting better grades at depth, took place at Mankuki South. And so that, that even as I tell you this, it's so much to take in. And I think it's difficult for the typical investor to understand, how significant is each of these drill results? Should these move the market? Well, honestly, they probably should. The company's market cap's 100 million, but these are definitely adding a lot of value. But still, I can understand why a typical retail investor might not get that. Now, moving forward a little further into this year, January, we had a really good start with this land acquisition of Mankuki West. Now, I have to say, I feel this image could be a little clearer for a retail guy, but at least you can tell from the magnetics, and I think the future news will be clear. You can tell this blue right here. It's kind of continuing and then faulted off this way. We actually saw that a little bit in the Mankuki South drilling, but this looks very prime right here. And then even right here, this continuation of KN1, they're getting that as well. So maybe not quite as valuable as Dabia Sud, which is this property and with Kabaya, but you can see it's an extension of that. So this is strategically, this is fantastic. And there's actually an interview with Trevor Hall from Mining Stock Daily where Nana describes, a relationship with the government. This was very cheap to acquire. Again, they are beating out the neighbors like Oklo in terms of having these relationships that builds, strategic land packages. So from both a drilling standpoint and a land acquisition standpoint, Roscan is winning in this region, bar none. And then we get to the most recent news this week, which arguably is the most significant of all with the Kabaya, not really a discovery, but arguably a new discovery. It's definitely more significant than the market took it. So give me 1 second. Because to gather my thoughts a little bit. So I'm going to spend a little more time on this section, and hopefully this is helpful for both understanding how the market missed this to a degree, and also for analyzing future news releases from Roscan and similar companies. So we have a bunch of really, not spectacular results, but very solid results. I mean, something like 30 meters at close to 3 grams per ton, from surface, but then also deeper holes. And even though this isn't a big one, it's still very important that they're hitting deep holes of significant grade early on. But these are just the highlights. And so if I'm going to knock Roscan for one thing, it would be images like this one, where even I look at it, I'm like, whoa, this is Kabaya, which hadn't been talked about since that acquisition early, 6 months earlier. And you look at this, you're like, holy cow, that's a lot to take in. And even I had trouble figuring out, what am I supposed to focus on with this plan map? Now, for instance, here we can see the 30 meters at 2.96. And that is a great drill hole drilled by Roscan, but it's like surrounded by all of these historical holes from Comet, and then some of them were even older. Right? There's Robex. There might have been another company, but you have this mixture of all these holes, and it's a lot to take in. Now, the other news release, or the other image, actually was much clearer to me. This still might be over some of your guys' heads, and totally understandable. But this was where I started to see the significance of what just happened. And the thing is, even locating the specific section of this, I think, was a little difficult at first. But you can see it here. The section's supposed to be in the southern part. So when we look at these holes, you need to match up those holes. DD14, DD12, and then there's even, yeah. So see, I'm having a little trouble there, but if we're going back and forth, we can see DD14, DD12. So really, the most significant part of what happened in this news release was actually down here, even though there's a lot of good stuff up here. So I really hope the company is clearer with the plan views in the future. I think even a color coding could have helped, but probably the number one thing was to make on this slide, make that cross section, show this is what you should really be focusing on. And now I'm going to explain why it should be focused on. So first of all, see these KM 2018, 2017, that describes some of Comet's drill holes from back in 2017, 2018. And this was clearly one of the best ones, 29 meters at 3 grams per ton, from surface. That this was one of the core areas of the NI 43101 that was created by Comet at the time. And you can see this is an optimized pit outline. And that pit outline, which some of you might not have noticed, is right here going down to 80 meters down drill hole, but really only, I think, 59 or 60 meters of direct vertical depth. And that's as far as Comet went. Now, I should spend just a little more time on this. Oftentimes when a company buys a historical resource, and this is a historical resource, and when it happens in North America, usually you're able to get it so cheaply because the company that you're buying from already realizes you can't drill at depth, or they realize there's some issue with continuity or there's some type of issue. Otherwise, why could you buy something so cheaply? Like, it doesn't make sense. Like, why didn't Comet drill these drill holes? Well, in this particular case, and this came from a few sources, Comet did something wrong or had some weird relationship in Mali, and they just had to get out. Like, it didn't make sense that they didn't drill anymore in 2019, for instance, but they didn't. And so this, if you can come up with a reasonable explanation for why a company like Roscan could buy Dabia Sud and this Comet deposit on the cheap, then you realize there's a real opportunity there. And basically on Tuesday this week, Roscan not only justified the acquisition, but showed it was a screaming steal because they got this effectively for $3.2 million Canadian, half in stock, half in cash. And they showed not only that there's good continuity at depth, but that this is very likely economic mineralization because it's all in the oxides. And knowing that there was a roughly 140,000 ounce inferred resource by Comet, we almost know for a fact that this is going to be expanded and grown just from these drill results, probably doubling or tripling. And this is speculation on my part, but I strongly feel that Roscan is already on the way to at least a 500,000 ounce resource at Kabaya when all is said and done, and very well could be a million plus ounce. So again, screaming deal. Like, if they bought this for 3.2 million Canadian, I think this deposit on its own is easily worth over 30 million right now. If these results came out from a junior that was worth 10 million, it could have doubled or tripled on the news easily. And on the next follow-up results, who knows, it could be worth 50 million plus or something like that. So all of that was fantastic. But of course, Roscan's share price did not move at all. And part of it, again, was, maybe both retail and institutions not fully understanding what's going on. But I would say the most important thing is that the gold market's not even moderately positive right now. It's neutral to a bit negative. Really, the junior market's more negative than the gold price. And, that might be telling us something. Just as a quick final note here, notice right here, 16 meters at 0.79 and 21 meters at 1.47. Those are both right here. There is a little bit of a gap in between, but effectively, this is closer to, 40 meters of a little over a gram per ton. And you can see there is this continuity. Even with the lower grades, there's this 0.1 gram per ton plus kind of halo around the higher grades. So that's why these cross sections are valuable, because you see all these little intersections, but they do come together with continuity. So I give Roscan credit for putting together this cross section. I actually think it's very clear, and I'm really excited to see how we build on that. But it's a lot for a retail to take in. So this is wide open to depth. These are oxide resources down here. It is interesting to note that not only Mankuki South, but also Oklo's Seiko deposit to the northeast all have very deep oxides. So I'm going to get into that in a second, but I think that's exciting from a standpoint of drilling more to depth, but also the expectation that even 1 gram per ton material, or roughly 1 gram or a little under 1 gram, could still very well be economic even at 200 meters depth for an enlarged open pit, or 150 meters. So I spent a little more time on that. I think it would have helped to have this type of long section. So this is just a note for the future. I hope that as these deposits develop more, we will see things more on along these lines. This is just a reposting at Mankuki South of the long section, which I think is great that Roscan put this together. But you need to deposit enough drill holes for this to come together. So hopefully Kabaya ends up having something similar to this, and we'll see how Mankuki South develops. But in my opinion, this is the type of visual that is generally clearer when you have a lot of information. You can see it a little clearer with the long section. So we'll see if Roscan can improve their materials a little bit. But I think I'm going to get into. Oh, did I? Maybe I. Oh, I wanted to show this first. So I spent a lot of time talking about multiple discoveries, spending more time on Kabaya than any of the other discoveries, and you can see many of these discoveries are labeled. Number 6 up here is Walia Musala Nord. Number 5 down here is Candiole Nord, kind of includes, all of the KN1s. So what I think is most important for Roscan to do, and I know they're planning to do this because I've had some good talks with Nana, and I asked him, I think he's fine with me sharing kind of the game plan, but this is also a lot of what I've just described to you is my own opinion. I think Roscan is in an evolution where initially Mankuki Central 2 years ago was the main focus. Then Mankuki South was the main focus. Now they are both part of this emerging, exciting Mankuki corridor, and we still have, multiple other targets that haven't been tested or that are on potentially parallel trends that are in the process of being tested. So how do we get this, communicate all the value in a few interesting slides? This is a great start. So there's 2 aspects. I think this Mankuki corridor is saying a lot about how all of this is coming together, and I would love for future interviews for Nana to talk more about Mankuki South as a very exciting corridor that is not far from the Senegal-Mali shear zone, which is closer to Fekola and Lulunkoto, because I initially was most excited about Roscan as potential satellite feed for Fekola or for Lulunkoto or for an IM Gold deposit like Sirabaya. And that's still an important value point. But what this Mankuki corridor symbolizes for me is that Roscan really can have a standalone deposit, because we already have Kabaya and Mankuki South that are emerging deposits, and many of these other discoveries will be emerging. And so there is multi-million ounces here. Oklo may end up being combined with Roscan. This actually, to me, is part of the reason that Roscan is beating out Oklo. This is the Dabia Sud property, and this is the Mankuki West. Oklo still just has some very exciting stuff here, but without me wanting to spend too much time, in my last video in April, I talked about, maybe Oklo, Roscan's going to catch up with the valuation of Oklo or even surpass it, and then maybe it'd be better to bet on Oklo. I've actually reduced my position significantly in Oklo. I don't want to go into details, but Roscan is absolutely beating Oklo on strategy over the last year. They have the more emerging discoveries, more emerging land, and they seem to have a better understanding of how this is developing. But eventually, they very well could be combined into some big standalone deposit or some big satellite feed for Fekola or Lulungokoto. So that is something that's still a lot to take in. It includes all the different discoveries I described, but I think it's one aspect of where Roscan should be really spending a lot of time telling the market. The other aspect is I'm actually more excited for in terms of easy communication, and that is creating a resource pyramid. Roscan, I think, is on the cusp of this, and this company is Matador Mining, MZZ on the ASX, one of my other big plays. Actually, it's one of my 3 big ones. Right, and just so you know,
Chesser, Roscan, and Matador are my three big holdings right now, but Roscan's the one I'm most excited about in the short term. But another one that's not quite in my top three, but that has grown in my portfolio is Nucor, and they also have this nice resource pyramid. So I'm just showing you these as two other examples of companies that have that I think currently have clearer PowerPoint presentations for the valuation, and Roscan is getting there. In this particular case, you can see that this Angus is very clearly described as a new discovery, and it may reach the inferred resource status. That's the way that Matador describes. And the entry project for Nucor, you can see that these are the deposits that have resources, and they are currently drilling, expanding those resources, but there are these other targets at different levels that are reaching that level and that would eventually be included in a resource update. So those are different ways of creating this resource pyramid. So what we want to see is Roscan to put many of, all these different discoveries that I described into one easy complementary slide to this Mankuki corridor slide. I think that's going to be so helpful to retail. And what I really like already is that Nana has all. Sorry, I lost my train of thought there. Yeah, exactly. This is true. Nana has already communicated that by Q4 2021, there will be a maiden resource on Roscan, and I think he's adamant about that. Now, the market is definitely going to expect at least 1 million ounce. I don't think the market should expect more than that. Like, we don't want to overpromise, but I'm telling you as an independent investor, I think it will be much higher than that. And I think that of all my holdings, the only holdings that eventually have the best chance, or not the only, but the ones that have the best chance to reach a coveted 5 million plus ounce status, and potentially down the road even become tier one, as we get closer to, something like a 10 million ounce. I truly believe Roscan could have that potential either through a combination of a couple of these deposits really growing much larger than 1 million ounces, and then adding on a bunch of satellite deposits that could be, 500,000 ounces or 1 million ounces. And if you think about it, whether it's possible that the Walia MO2 or the MO1 or the KN1, it's possible that some of them don't pan out, but it's also possible that some of them end up being, 500,000 ounce to 1 million ounce deposits. It's possible that some of them end up being 1 to 2 million, and it's possible that some of them may even surpass Kabaya or Mankuki West. Some of these others that haven't been drilled yet could actually be larger. This is what I really like about Roscan, is that it's so dynamic and that it has all of these targets, multiple targets that could very quickly go from 0 ounces to 1 million plus, or could go from the 140,000 ounces of Kabaya to over 500,000 or 1 million plus, or Mankuki South could actually become much larger, or Mankuki Central, which was a little bit has been ignored for a little while, I think is going to come back to the forefront and maybe become combined with Mankuki West, and maybe there's something big here. So it's again a lot to take in, but the company's on the cusp of putting this together, and it's not that, even by Q4, maybe there'll be a 1 million, 2 million, or 3 million ounce resource, something like that. But even if there's a resource announced, there's all these discoveries, new discoveries, new targets that would be emerging. And so I think the company understands that you're never stuck at just a certain number. And that's actually the truth of a lot of development plays. Not that there's anything wrong with them, but there's some advanced developers that have much less potential to really pack on the ounces. I think Roscan and the only other company, Chesser, that I own that have the best chance to really increase those ounces over the next 12 months, or 12 to 24 months, they're probably the best examples of that, because companies like Matador and Nucor have really good chances to do that too. At the moment, though, I'm not as much of a believer in them as Roscan in terms of adding the ounces. And unlike both of those companies, It's very rare to be next door to B2 Gold and to Barrick. So that's always in the background too. From a valuation standpoint, I um, I think it's hard for me to say exactly where Roscan should be trading right now. But from a promotion, what I also like is that SOAR Financial, which is Kai Hoffman and Mining Catalyst, they've been doing interviews with Nana. Trevor from Mining Stock Daily, he's done some good interviews. So I think that this retail promotion side is starting to come out. There's also been some analyst reports that the institutions more pick up on. I think Roscan has had two that have picked up recently, and there might be a few more. But as something that's you only have access to if you subscribe to CEO Pro or some other level 2 service in Canada, excuse me, this is actually quite valuable from an institutional standpoint. In the last week, and I did check this going back, Canaccord and Echelon are net buyers of quite a large amount, and Claris is actually a closer, it wouldn't surprise me if some of these were warrant exercises that that went, from an exercise from some of the people who were in previous placements and went directly to new funds or new larger players that were through Canaccord and Echelon. It may be or may not be, but what's important, we see Claris and Anonymous as the biggest net sellers. So we don't know, like Anonymous could be just one seller, but we're not sure. But we know for sure that Canaccord and Echelon are two houses that just in the last week, and I did verify this, picked up quite a few shares. And just as another way of looking at this, let me go to the older. On Friday morning, wow, it took a lot to get back there. On Friday morning, right at the open, 1.4 million went from Claris to Canaccord. And then you can see all of these kind of automated Anonymous and Canaccord stock buys. That is institutional. That is not retail. So sorry, getting back to the valuation, I just described we've got some promising things happening from both a more retail focus and a both more institutional focus. And we have the first, green candles in basically since the beginning of the year. And this was kind of tough. I mean, like other stocks went through this as well, but Roscan went down from 40 cents to 32 and a half. I actually bought a lot of shares back, that I sold and months ago. I bought some more, in this mid 30s range. So we're trading at 36 right now. So from a valuation standpoint, just to kind of end on this note, and actually I should, I don't think I'll talk too much or talk about other stocks, but I just, just to focus on Roscan, or finish up on Roscan on this video. We've been, even looking back 3 months, we basically tested this intermediate bottom, like 32 and a half, 33, basically 3 times in the last 3 months. And we zoom out, and all that value add I talked about, the new discoveries, and in particular Kabaya just now, and the Molly coup, basically, not going back to normal, but going back to that 18-month transition period and stability. The market has been flat ever since that moment, and it doesn't make sense. It only makes sense from a macro standpoint if all gold stocks, are down. Now there are a few other ones that have outperformed. There are exceptions, but I think what's important here is that we have all this built up value that the market maybe just forgot about, and it's all going to start to come together with people understanding this Mankuki corridor coming together and coming out with a resource pyramid to explain to the market that multi-million ounces are very likely going to be announced. Not necessarily announced in Q4, but I think that there's a good chance that Roscan's on the path to not just 2 or 3 million ounces, but even closer to something like 5 million ounces. But we're not there yet. All we know is that we have all these discoveries that have been made, and that there's likely going to be resources that are added to them. That's going to happen throughout this year. Is Roscan really going to be at this level or even go down from here? I don't see it. I see this as a great entry point or a great point to add. If you got excited about Roscan at the same time that I did back here, that's where you have to add perspective of this timeline. I am not the reason this is going to move. As I said back in April, and I'm not the reason it moved back here either. I think we're at probably the best entry point since my last recommendation. That's just my opinion. Could be wrong about that. I think that there's going to be a lot of other people to pick up on this. I think there's room for newsletters to pick up on it. They don't have to, but this combination of more retail promotion, more institutional interest, which is very clear, and just clearer communication from the company. And as a final note, I did feel very excited that Nana talked about geophysics and geophysical modeling helping to show how potentially the corridor is coming together, and maybe having some webinars with geos involved. I think that's a great idea. I'm not saying that will happen, but I'm just saying all these things are being planned, and I really see this as 2021 as Roscan's time to shine. As probably one of the best stories in West Africa, as kind of an exploration, not development story, but growing resource, and potentially an acquisition candidate this year, but definitely much more of an acquisition candidate based on approaching a maiden resource or having a maiden resource, and not something you're going to wait till it gets to a feasibility study. Again, that's why you can't really compare it to companies that are advanced developers. So let's see if Roscan can retest the all-time highs, and I think that I guess I didn't touch on it, but I think they have enough cash, and there's every time warrants are exercised, more cash comes in the coffers. I don't see a raise happening down here. I think a raise could very well happen at the 50-cent level, and it just kind of builds momentum. But that's not what this is about. I think this is a great entry point, both for a short-term perspective and for seeing this stock, go to the $1 or $2 range. If this really has 5 million ounce potential or even tier 1 potential, it's going to be closer to like a $2 stock. Half a billion to $1 billion valuation down the road. But that's all in the future. Let's see what happens. I hope at least some of this video was valuable to you. Again, some of the links I described are below this video. Always do your own research. There's a lot of promotion going on all over the place. But, Roscan, I think, is one of these good companies doing solid technical progress, working with good promoters, but not being overly hypey. But I think the hype's going to come on its own. So this is Nick, the Mining Book Guy. Thanks for listening, and hopefully I'll have more interesting videos for you soon.